that we're bringing forward today. Some of these we have gone over with Finance Committee, some they have not even seen before. So the very first one, based on the AFS, we need to bring down the delinquent taxes a little bit. I was a little too aggressive in the number that I thought we had outstanding, so that's just a $6,000 reduction. The summer youth program, you'll see a revenue and an appropriation for $20,000. This is a grant that Elisa was able to attain from the Princeton Community Foundation. So we're going to pick that up on the revenue side and on the appropriation side. Corner House, you know, with the way their grants work from the state of New Jersey, there's always grants that fall off, grants that come in. The net effect is they had about $40,000 in grant reductions, and Corner House Foundation has increased what they're going to give to the municipality in 2017 by $30,000. So the net there was about a $10,000 shortfall in revenues for Corner House.
Well, is that included in the front page Corner House, or is that separate? I mean, is that just an explanation for, I mean,
the change that's on the front, this is in addition to the change on the front.
okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay. Looking at the appropriations, in the public defender, we have a trust fund of revenue that's collected when people use our public defender. So as we did last year, we took some money out of the trust account and reduced this appropriation. So we were recommending that we do the same thing again. Similar with emergency management, salary and wage. We have a FEMA or a SAFER grant that Bob Gregory was able to attain, and as similar in last year's budget, we reduced the salary because we're going to charge some of the grant for Bob Gregory's salary, which is okay in accordance with the grant agreement. Legal services and costs. I have this budget going up a little bit because the hourly rate for the attorney increased and the retainer increased $1,000 a month as well. So that's something that, you know,
So shouldn't it go up more than 10,000?
I'm sorry?
Shouldn't it go up more than 10,000?
It should, well, I had already provided.
Yeah, part of that in there, so.
The library OE, the library, when they submitted their budget, there was a $35,000 reduction that they made in what they were asking for from us. They had some surplus funds on hand that they're going to use to reduce the municipal contribution. Summer youth program grant I mentioned. And the Corner House salary and wage, I have a full-time employee there that Gary is reducing to part-time status. So we're going to save $37,000 in his salary line as well. And then two of the things that were, I think, brought up for council goals were, and I'll leave Mark to talk to these, an increase in the planning board and an increase in historic press.
Actually, the number just, and I may have given, because I gave you a flat number and I tell you how to break it out, so I'm just going to make one change. In terms of the planning board, this is some decisions that council have to make based on our priorities. One of the things, there's a lot of things going on in planning, and if we want to do all of the planning, we're going to need a consultant. We discussed additional. I'm estimating that's going to be about 130, not the 120 that's here. And then there's the study for, not the study, hiring of the masonry expert for historic preservation. That's 20,000. We just have to flip those numbers a little bit.
Is that
So
is the mason for the 206?
for the 206 bridge.
206.
And we're going to ask the state to help?
Yes,
That's what
so I have requested to the state, and then they basically said no. And then Brian Hughes said he would get back to me.
The state doesn't see the value of this, the important historic value of this bridge? Doesn't want to help?
They do, but they want us to pay for the masonry expert. But I feel like we might want to go back to them also, because the agreement that they've made with the contractor, it's like they're supposed to be consulting with this person, and that's in the bid documents.
Ah, so then that's good.
Yeah.
So hope for the best one to
I'm sorry, for the historic preservations, what is that increase in 30,000?
It should actually be 20, and it's to hire the masonry expert.
But we just, are we just eliminating, we decided, or we thought that we were gonna need more, help because of the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, and that's why we talked about Access Princeton, didn't we?
Yes.
And now we're just deciding that we don't need that?
At this point, I've been working with historic preservation in terms of additional staffing. I'm not sure that we'll need additional staffing, but we're working on that. I'm not asking for additional money for that.
The point is, it hasn't yet hit the work, and so
So
put
I'm
it,
not-
I mean,
We're working on the workload to see if there is really a need, and if there is, we'll figure it out for this year and how we provide that. The one thing that I want to do is at this time is what I need from council. One is direction on those new expenditures in terms of the $130,000 for the planning board, 2, historic preservation for the $20,000, whether to include, because these are not included in our numbers right now.
If we agree to it from a budget standpoint, are we agreeing to it? Are we really agreeing to it?
Like, are we setting aside the money?
You know, like,
or
we're not
are we
really,
giving it-
we're not having a discussion on the merits of this masonry person this morning, but we could include it in the budget and still say no
No,
at some later.
Exactly,
point.
exactly. It would have to come back to us
Right.
as a specific item for approval.
Correct.
Well,
And
no.
this is one of the things that later on, where we can make amendments to the budget if necessary.
but shouldn't we flip the presumption and go to the state and say it's not included in our budget because our budget is really tight this year and we really need this help? Doesn't it undermine our case to the state if we've included it in the budget?
Well, and if the bid documents say that
Yeah.
somebody's already supposed to be consulting with them, that's in the bid docs.
Well, I mean, I don't wanna get you down in the weeds, but essentially it says that the bid doc said that they will consult with HPC. And HPC feels like they need this person in order to make good advice.
Okay, but this is $20,000 we're talking about, right?
Yes.
So it's unresolved.
Well, we can flip it either way, so either we cannot have it in and then amend it to stick it in, and maybe we do it that way. And that
I
gives
agree,
us
it
more
does seem
leverage.
like
It's-
they're just gonna say no, that's just what I think.
This is something we want to keep as an amendment. And again, that's going to definitely
What
require
makes your life more difficult,
Well,
I guess?
I'm just trying to think. It would definitely require
No, not if we make the change before the introduction.
but I'm thinking if we reduce it, but then if we reduce it, it's going to probably.
Then it will definitely require an amendment.
I don't wanna make your life more difficult,
Well, but it's definitely, I think you're definitely right, there's never, even if they see this need, they're gonna say no.
And I'm going to include it in, so you definitely see it, you see what the impact is. You keep it, if it's in, you see the impact. You can always take it out.
Well, but then if you've got it in, it gets spent on something else,
It
something
just
else.
increases the baseline, I mean, right, it just gets absorbed and, yeah.
No, I'm saying before, you can amend it before you approve the budget. Make that decision before you actually approve the budget.
Okay,
But you put it in so you know what the impact is.
but if, when we discuss the budget, people forget to bring this up, that we're talking about this specifically, we've got 20,000 will end up in historic preservation's budget, and it's not, another request would come along, say we work it out, the state gets the mason,
Right.
they decide to pay for it, but oh, by the way, they want to use the 20 grand for the architectural study.
If you wanted, the only other way to control that, if you wanted to take it out of the department budget, put it somewhere, put it in, like, my budget.
Administration.
That way,
And
you have
you're
control.
spending it. I see what it's saying. Can you tell me a little bit more about the planning issues?
As we indicated, for planning this year, we have a number of mandatory activities, including the master plan, reexamination, the neighborhood study project. In addition, just trying to remember what the other ones were. Request. Give me a second.
Well, I can just jump in, there were a lot of issues, it seems like we're being inundated with planning issues. I mean, some of them like the Butler tract, and rezoning for affordable housing that we need to
Right,
do, and other kinds of zoning issues. And then people have asked, I can't even think about, so there are so many, so many like items on our to-do list that we just can't possibly do them.
We
There's
don't
also
have
the
a set.
revaluation of master plan this year,
Right.
that's a requirement.
And so we're talking, this is money for consultants then, is that what it
Correct.
is?
Yeah, and we could say, okay, we're not gonna do anything, but,
Those all sound like important things.
when you hear, when you hear about all the different issues, which I can't think off the top of my head.
But you,
You
as,
think, oh no, we don't
as
wanna
our
put that
reps to the
off.
board,
Well-
you think this is important?
I do, very important, especially the neighborhood character piece, because we did the sort of first round, it all didn't get through, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and what we're seeing
And
now
the needs are pressing.
is every time that, my observation is when we move in a certain direction, we see the applications increase with people trying to get stuff
Yeah.
through
Get 'em in.
before the new regs come in, and that perpetuates this cycle where it increases the work of the planning office. The board sees more applications, we're meeting twice a month, and so this important piece that would help mitigate a big issue in town gets sort of back burner when it should be out front.
$130, $130,000 is not a small amount of money. And it appears to be made up of multiple activities. Is there any possibility of seeing a list on getting this prioritized?
Yes. And again, most of this, when I sat down with Lee to go over this, where it would be most helpful would be the neighborhood character, and that's putting together the ordinances, doing the public hearings, and really the whole process of working through the individual ordinances where it would be most helpful, and we can give you a breakdown.
So just to sum up, I think what I'm hearing is back for the masonry expert. I think most people were more inclined to leave it out for now, and then if we need to amend it, to stick it back in, is that?
I think we should.
So leave it out, and then, it sounds like there's support for the 130 for planning, but to get more detail on it.
Well, I'd like to back up a little bit, because since I'm not on the finance committee, I forget who it is.
Bernie,
We go to.
Because, I feel like, I'd like to know, did you consider reducing, say, the number of police? Like, did you consider, did you say, okay, we don't want a tax increase? Or did you say, oh, we're gonna have a tax increase and that's what this budget is? Do you see what I'm asking? Because I feel like now you're a step ahead of me because I haven't accepted the reality that we have to have a budget increase. But this does, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't be there if I had been on the finance committee, but since I'm not, I don't know what you considered and rejected as far as reductions, or if you considered reductions,
Well,
or where we could maybe become more.
I'm going to step in where angels fear to tread on this one.
Okay.
Answer to your question is yes, all of those items were discussed, they were discussed with the chief, and we will be coming back with some specific recommendations that pertain to getting a more efficient operation in some parts of the police department where there are opportunities perhaps for civilianization of activities in the department.
And one of the things,
We looked at staffing of the sworn officers, but did not move in that direction at this point.
yeah, I'm
we haven't
saying.
gone through, we haven't gone through the second half of this, was to talk about just that then.
Okay.
Okay,
But I want to just go through where we went first, and then we can,
Yeah, Mark I think there are about three sources of the $1 million difference between last year's budget and this year's. Aren't there, there's really three big numbers that account for most of it. Did we sit and say, what would a zero increase look like? No, because as we started to do that, we quickly realized it was gonna be hard to affect that change for this year's budget anyway. We're already committed to certain things.
We're into it, right?
yeah, okay.
And so if we
That's what I
wanted,
needed.
even if we were to talk about a reduction of police, for instance, in the force, we'd be talking about through attrition, and a retirement.
Right.
It's not really gonna impact it till next year. So we have a lot of decisions, and I guess Mark's gonna get into that we can look at, but they're more likely to impact the budget for next year.
So, and just to continue to tread where angels fear. That, yeah, I think what we did was that we met with the major departments, the biggest departments, so, engineering, rec, public works, and public safety, and police. And whatever their budget talked about issues, and so what you're gonna see are some of the specific things that came up, and as Bernie mentioned, for example, we talked about some ideas of where the strategic plan talks about civilianizing some of the functions of the police department and are there savings there, but generally, and we walked through, and if Bob walks in at the right time, we talked about things like, what would it mean if you changed leaf and brush pickup, and we struggled with the issue of, even, you don't even save a lot if you don't pick up, because you don't necessarily eliminate this many FTEs, so we basically reviewed and met with department heads from each of those big departments and walked through and asked them for ideas, probed them on their budgets, and that's what's gonna result in what you're gonna see.
Thank you. Because we will have these same big numbers last year, and the truth is, we actually got lucky this year, because health costs went up and our pension costs went up, but not as much as sort of a worst-case scenario. And at any time, we could have that worst-case scenario. And we're still gonna have that big shortfall in the account that I can never remember the name of it, with capital reserve debt.
Capital,
The reserve.
debt service reserve.
Thank you. Debt service reserve.
So we need to make sure planning consultant and for the 130 in the introduced budget.
And 20 out.
Yeah, and
But
the,
with a
with
list,
an asterisk. Yes, we wanted to see the breakdown of the
130.
with estimate.
130.
Breakdown in some order of priority.
Is that coming from Lee?
Yes.
I think also just if you look at our council priorities for 2017, you'll notice a lot of them fall under planning. And I think that's part of the issue. Plus, on top of it, there's so much activity that just the regular baseline of application review has taken up more time.
Well, at 130, it did cross my mind, would we be better off hiring someone who would also have more capacity, or is this?
I asked
I think
that same exact question.
My response to that, I see this as a short-term issue, not a long-term, and you don't want to start
No,
paying
yeah,
employees.
that's right,
Yeah.
no, we never go back. Can I ask one other question? You know, covering Bob Gregory, some of Bob Gregory's salary through that grant seems like a great solution for this year, but doesn't that leave us a little exposed next year that?
Well, actually, that grant, we should be able to go for a couple of years.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
sure.
thought it was 4 or 5 years.
There's enough in there that covers for a number of
I
years.
won't be here the next time.
And what we'll do is we'll start weaning ourselves off of that.
Okay.
I think after, and as we see in the budget, in the 5-year projection, it should get a little better 3 years from now. So we'll start to wean ourselves off of that, but we need to spend it anyway. We've got the grant, so we need to spend the money. One thing I wanted to do before we jump into where we are is, based on all the changes that you've seen here, excluding what we just talked about, we did a quick calculation of what the impact is on the average household. And I believe it's about $90
Right.
increase and a 2.3% increase on where the budget stands today. Would be a 2.3 and about $90 increase in the budget. We'd have to add in 130, which of course will change that amount.
Now, so I don't mean to harp on the police issue, but it's my understanding that right now the police personnel is at a low.
Very low.
And so wouldn't this be a good opportunity to,
No, but it's not, I mean, if I may, it's not sustainable where we are at the police department now. You just can't.
well, if we continue to use our police the way we're using?
Right, I think it calls the question that we ought to address, which is what do we want our force to look like and what do we want it to be? And I think the conversation we've had both in finance and public safety is, I think you would hear Chief Sutter say he could he could absolutely operate the department with fewer officers. It would just look like a different department.
Yeah.
And it would,
I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, and so it would mean probably eliminating sort of the optional,
Policing.
the optional, what's the word they use for the units.
Yes.
SNU.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safe neighborhoods
Yeah.
and traffic enforcement, because you still need a certain number of patrol and detective and the, sort
Yeah.
of the baseline activities of the department.
Yeah.
And you would lose that, so I think it just would
Yeah.
call that question of what you would lose. I mean,
Yeah.
and I,
But because I've also never really heard how did we reduce, because when I was, in the borough, before we had the MOU, the borough police spent a lot of time on Prospect Avenue,
And we
and,
did get something from the chief.
remember
on
he said that we still do go to Prospect, and yeah, he sent that email.
yeah, I can tell that it's not nearly as
I mean,
much.
and I would just say, like, for the record,
I'll find it.
for the record, I would say that, yes, police department is where you wanna, you go where, like Willie Sutton, you go where the money is, and obviously it's a place where the money
Well,
is.
we're like agonizing over 130,000, and it's like one police officer.
But I would just say, in defense, I mean, the police department is one area where, since consolidation, we've actually maintained and actually saved more than expected, and some areas, looking at Bob Huff, have grown,
Yeah,
and, several departments have actually grown since consolidation, so,
Right.
so we could keep going back, but it's up, at what point do we do that, do we undermine, the progress we've made, and so,
Yeah.
so that's
I
a
know.
public policy decision we need to make,
I know,
obviously.
I just know when I went to the meeting, I'm sure Tim probably heard this did you hear, when, like, the League of Municipalities workshop, when you first become an elected official, those people are saying, look at your police department, look at your, and I know it's really easy for it to increase because of all of the things that cause, police salaries to be
Right.
high.
Well, that's why it really is, you're gonna see when we get to that, we continue to find more savings, and we have proposals for more savings. So I feel like of all the departments, I don't wanna speak for my colleagues, I felt like, that was one of the more productive conversations we had, where we
Yeah.
actually continued to find savings.
Yeah. I have other departments too that I have questions about
Yeah,
too.
don't let Bob Huff off.
I'm taking those, what is your items again? I'm planning a snowstorm for next week.
I live on Library Place.
Okay.
There was an email that I think the chief sent
Yes.
to public safety, I don't think it
Oh,
got
okay,
circulated,
forwarded,
into
sorry.
forwarded, but essentially said there were 500 calls to Prospect in 2016, so it still is,
They're just not on the police water, I guess.
But since this topic has come up, it's a
Well,
good
a lot of
segue.
regrets.
But,
Yeah.
but there was, and I just wanna say, there was during consolidation, a model presented as an option that was fewer,
Yeah, there was a
a
47.
46 or 47
47.
person model, which seemed too dramatic at that time, because we were going from
Such a
sixty
big
to
Yeah.
51, and no
Yeah.
one was sure what that would feel like in terms of the work, but, now that we've successfully made that, I think it's ripe for a discussion.
And I think the chief was quite forthcoming on it. He
Yeah.
said,
Mhm.
give me guidance, tell me
Yeah.
how many officers you want me to have,
Mhm.
and I will structure the department accordingly. But keep in mind that when we do that, that there will be a reduction in services in some areas.
Right, and I think, you can get a little misled when we have retirements and we're replacing them with less expensive employees. But eventually, the tradition is that they will stay a long time and become expensive employees. So,
Right.
you can't fool yourself into thinking that that's permanent savings. You do have a permanent savings when you're going from 60 to 51, but the fact that you're gaining from longevity
Right.
is a bit of a mirage.
But we also have to keep in mind that you never really at 51. So if you have 51 people, you might have 46.
I understand that, I understand.
46, and if
All
you have
those
46,
models-
but if you have 46, you'll have 39. I mean, it's just, we have to
Right.
keep in mind, where we're gonna be, that's the problem.
This is all, none of this is taking into account national priorities and the impact of President Trump and
I know.
his, what he's pushing down on us, and, yeah.
so my